A teen worker in America who had just gotten hired at a grocery store had very nefarious intentions. He started to put needles into food because he wanted to hurt people. And for the few days that he worked there, he went all around the store putting needles into all kinds of random food items. Swallowing a sewing needle is extremely dangerous. If it doesn't cut your throat on the way down, it might cut your insides on the way out. And they're so tiny, which makes them very hard to locate inside food. After a few days, the store manager found out what was going on and fired the kid. Almost all the food in the store had to be deemed contaminated and thrown out. And you can imagine how much money that grocery store ended up losing because of this derelict. Because he's a teenager, his name hasn't been released, but he has been arrested. This kid is very lucky he lives in America and not where I'm from in Turkey. Because if they discovered a worker had been putting needles into food in Turkey, the entire city would take turns punching that kid in the mouth, no matter how old he is. One of my all-time favorite YouTubers is a man who speaks in this exact monotone tonality. Moist Critical, aka Penguin Zoe, aka Charlie, is a legend of the online space. I just can't stop watching this guy. He can make anything sound interesting. He's been making videos for 16 years. He is the crocodile equivalent of a content creator. He survived many cancellation attempts, meta changes, the apocalypse, yet he is still here and bigger than ever. But there is one thing I wish he would change. I wish he would go bald. He could be the hero of all heroes if he shaved his head, the modern equivalent of Alexander the Great. And he can sell each strand of hair for like 10 grand, pump it into his esports organization, Moist Esports, and take over that industry. He has 13 million subscribers right now. He could get to 50 million in a matter of weeks. All he has to do is shave his head and become the hero that the world needs. Because the hero we deserve already lives among us. And Mr. Beast did shave his head, and now look at his success. I want you to put yourself inside the mind of a mugger. You're probably going to look for someone who wouldn't be able to fight back, someone you could easily overpower. This mugger in question also had a gun on him, meaning he could pretty much win any fight he was in unless he got too close. And he decided to make this nerdy looking guy his victim of choice. Unfortunately for the mugger, this nerd happened to be a little more than meets the eye. He happened to be Justin Gaethje, who is one of the baddest human beings on the entire planet. He's a professional cage fighter, and he is known as the single most violent fighter in the history of the UFC. And this guy was trying to mug him. He picked the wrong victim, and then he got too close because Justin knocked that gun out of his hand, then whooped his ass. This is what the mugger looked like before, and this is what he looked like in the jailhouse after Justin beat him. Knowing how Justin Gaethje fights, he went really easy on him, used probably like 2% of his power. Let's have a look at some school lunches from around the world. This school lunch is from my home country of Turkey, and I can confirm they like to leave one part of the tray empty because of budget cuts. Apparently in Estonia, the lunch ladies like to vomit in the food before serving it to students. In parts of Romania, they serve you this giant cashew fortune cookie mix looking thing. When we get to Italy, now we're talking. Look at the amount of grapes they serve you. That's so much. And South Korea definitely cares about giving their students plenty of vegetables. Those vegetables actually look appetizing. The same can't be said about this American lunch where the vegetables just make you want to cry. Russia doesn't surprise me. They serve borscht for lunch. I just wish they would also serve a shot of vodka alongside it. In Spain, they actually give you shrimp for lunch. You know you're living large when they give you expensive seafood. And just when I thought I couldn't be any more disgusted with British food, here we are. Forget that disgusting wieners and beans. They place their silverware in the middle of the tray. Let's have a look at some classrooms from around the world. In Tunisia, students cross their arms to show teachers that they're paying attention. These dedicated students in Syria are learning math equations from this whiteboard setup. In North Korea, even the windows in the classroom look depressing. These students in Morocco have some really cool art on their walls. These Indonesian kids are having recess while there's an active volcano spewing ash right next to them. A teacher in China is teaching her students how to do eye exercises or how to cry like a student. You can tell this is an American classroom by those connected desks and seats. These students in Yemen are walking to their classroom that's made of straw. And these British students have to wear their blazers and a straw hat to school for some reason. This Nigerian classroom is outside, and many of these students can't even afford school supplies. This classroom in France has some of the nicest seats for students I've ever seen. The same can't be said for this Turkish classroom with wooden planks for seats which destroy your tailbone. This photo has one of the saddest backstories I've ever heard. The man on the right is named Joe Arity. His nickname was the happiest prisoner on death row. In 1936, when he was 20 years old, he was arrested and charged with the murder of 2 young twin girls. His lawyers argued that Joe was mentally disabled. He had an IQ of only 46 and the mind of a 6-year-old. But that didn't stop the state from sentencing him to die in the gas chamber. All the prisoners there liked him because he was nice and kind to everybody. Even the warden treated him like his own son. On the day of his execution, Joe gave his toy trains to another inmate and asked him to look after it until he got back. He was executed a few hours later. Even the warden was in tears because he did not believe that Joe could have hurt anybody. And it turned out he was right. 72 years later, Joe Arity received a pardon after DNA samples proved he hadn't committed the murders. Former UFC fighter Paige Van Zandt said that she made more money during her first 24 hours of OF than she made during her entire UFC career. There's always a lot of talk about UFC fighters not getting paid properly. I've been a huge fight fan for a long time, and I remember watching Paige Van Zandt when she first came into the UFC. She was not a good fighter when compared to the rest of the UFC fighters in her weight class. She was more so known for being the most attractive person on the UFC roster, and she smartly capitalized on that. That's how her name was built. And after she was cut from the UFC, she gave into fan demand, started an OF, and broke the bank. There are thousands of thirsty dudes who are willing to pay hundreds of dollars to see some raunchy photos from Paige. I'm not hating on her by any means. She's making bank. Good for her, but she's one of the lucky ones. So many fighters make very little money before getting cut from the UFC. It's the nature of the business. It sucks, but it is what it is. As Dana White says, fighting is not a career, it's an opportunity because you never know what's gonna happen. I was shaving earlier today and I had a random flashback to when I was in grade 11 in Istanbul, Turkey. The school I was attending was very strict when it came to shaving. You had to come to school with a clean shave, no exceptions. If the teacher saw you and you didn't have a clean shave, they would do one of 2 things. The first option was the easy one. They would insult you a little bit and then send you home for the day and tell you to come back tomorrow with a clean shave. The second option was far more sinister. They would send you to the dean's office where he would have a razor blade waiting for you. But the catch is that razor was a cheap and communal razor blade which was used by other students who came to school without a clean shave. The blade itself was super dull, so you were pretty much guaranteed to cut your face in multiple places while using it. Who knows how many diseases were lurking around on this thing, but the teachers didn't care. They also didn't have any shaving foam, so we would have to use that ineffective liquid soap in the bathrooms as shaving cream. But I will say it was very effective because after a single time of using this communal razor, you never forgot to shave again. I don't know how this woman managed to survive more than half a century on this planet with such a limited brain. 56-year-old Pascal Ferrier got sent to prison today for attempting to assassinate Donald Trump. Here's where it takes a turn for the stupid. This idiot isn't American, nor does she live in America. She is from Laval, Canada, and she tried to end Trump by sending him a letter that was laced with ricin across international borders. First off, she's been watching too much Breaking Bad. She thinks she's Heisenberg, but she's actually Tucker with like 20 seconds of screen time. Second, there is no way this woman thought she would get away with this. Apparently, she has a master's in engineering. She's not supposed to be an idiot, but clearly she caught the blockhead virus. She actually thinks the president sits at his desk and opens his own mail with one of those old school mail opener thingies. She told the judge in court that she's actually an activist for justice. The judge smiled, told her fuck you, and sentenced her to 22 years in prison. I think the takeaway here is don't take personally what other world leaders are doing because they aren't even aware of your existence. These are what school buses from around the world look like. Japanese kids get to go to school in a Pikachu mobile, while the kids in Germany get to commute in an old school Mercedes. Buses in Vietnam are built a little higher because they have to navigate the flooded roads during the rainy season. And the school bus in Kenya looks like a charter bus that travels between cities. In the UAE, all school buses have GPS and cameras to ensure student safety. And if you're in Turkey, you better pray your school van driver knows how to drive properly, otherwise you're gonna be dizzy the entire time. School buses in Libya are generally reserved for private school students. Meanwhile, you can smell that old leathery scent of American school buses just by looking at this photo. British students get to go on this sick double-decker just to get to school. And in Soviet Russia, the students are the bus. Nah, I'm kidding. Russian school buses all have high-performance winter tires because of the nature of Mother Nature.